from this commercial, from this class. First of all, I learned how the term digital transformation evolved. It started with digitization, right? And digitization, for those of us that remember what it was like before everything was digital, like vinyl and cassette tapes, right, the good old days, the basic act of converting analog media into digital, right? And we might remember companies that were all of a sudden taking all of their media and putting it up on the internet and making it available. And that is basically what digitization is. So then the next term that evolved from that, they added an L. It's digitalization. And this one takes the concept of, okay, we're gonna take our digital content, let's say, but we're also gonna use it to help us make more money, let's say. So it's actually involving the business models and the processes. For example, the New York Times went, once they launched on the web, and it was free for a while, but then they started like, let's see if we can monetize this, so they put up a paywall. That's digitalization. Then came digital transformation. That's where we are now. And digital transformation takes digitalization, but takes it all, it scales it up so that it's actually the entire enterprise. It's not just focused on the value proposition of taking their digital assets and monetizing them, but changing the way that the company operates, doing actual organizational change so that the company is more efficient and more effective and can basically protect itself from other companies that are going to try to swoop in and compete with them. She has this framework called B.U.I.L.D, and B.U.I.L.'s an acronym. And it stands, these are the words that the letters stand from. The first one is bridge. And so her idea for bridge is we need to bridge the gaps between the company and the people and the customers. And so there's two types of bridges. There's external bridges and internal bridges. And the external bridges are the bridges to the customers, and this idea that we need to have the customer, bring the voice of the customer into the company, particularly to the C-suite. That we need to, and we're familiar with this from user research, be talking to the customers, listening to the customers. Maybe the customers are keeping diaries. They're giving us some kind of feedback on a regular basis, and we're learning from them what their needs and goals are. And then we also need internal bridges. We need to have the different types, have cross-functionality within the company so that we don't just have silos of the designers are over here and the marketing people over here and the C-suite's up there, and nobody's really talking to each other, especially when a new person comes on board and they're not really sure, who do I talk to if I want to get things done. There needs to be this really open, transparent way for people to communicate with each other, beyond Slack. So the second letter stands for uncover. And with uncover, it's basically this concept that when you go in as a digital transformation consultant, or maybe you're working from the inside, you need to understand really what's that company's hidden assets or things that are going to prevent them from actually digitally transforming. So let's say an asset could be a really great partnership they have that they're able to leverage, or maybe they have some intellectual property, or maybe they have this amazing innovation center that they're not completely using, but they have people in there doing all kinds of really cool prototypes. Or maybe they have a workforce that's outdated and there's a bunch of people there that are a little bit afraid of embracing new technology. And these could be people that are at the mid-manager level, and they're really going to prevent the people who, let's say, are younger or newer to the company, who want to do things in a new way, but they're scared about losing their jobs. And so all of these different types of barriers and assets need to be identified. Then the next letter is iterate. We all know this one because we all want to iterate when we are building as designers and see what works. And so that's part of her framework too, is that we conduct experiments like scientists, that we do them in short cycles, that we run them as structured experiments where we're collecting evidence and that we're learning, and we're trying to figure out which ideas will actually have legs that we could potentially scale in the future. And then the next letter is leverage. And leverage is the idea of leveraging the successes that happened during the iteration phase. So let's say that you have a group over here that came up with a really cool concept, and it could potentially be part of a new business model, or maybe it's really disruptive and they're not sure what to do with it. And so this isn't something that necessarily should be released to the public, but it's something that should be shared with the company. You know, that there should be these all hands meetings or ways to share the successes and even the failures of all of the different innovation experiments happening within the company, so that everybody can learn from them and be part of the process and not feel like, oh God, here's like this little hub or lab over there where the cool things happen and we're kind of in the old person area, not aware of what's happening, and they're gonna ultimately come in and change everything. And that's the general attitude, the fear of people when they're working for a large enterprise. And so by having this idea where you're sharing these ideas on a regular basis with the entire company, it hopefully inspires an open mindset. Bless you. And the last letter is disseminate. And this basically means let's start disseminating these new innovations with the public. Let's start testing them. Even if we aren't necessarily doing experiments where we're putting the name of the company on them, and we're just using a different name to experiment with how will this idea work, and sharing it with the public and getting feedback, and ultimately scaling all the little innovation ideas to a much larger scale, and slowly revamping the way that the company works in terms of their internal processes so that they can continuously create innovative concepts. Let's talk about the next level down. What was the value proposition of Netflix? No late fees, right? Which was how Blockbuster really made their money. They were banking on us not watching the movie, or the movies that we took home on the first night, or not making it back the next day. Easy access, the product came to us. We didn't have to get in our cars and drive to the store. A wider selection, but even like the most tantalizing was personalized recommendations. They were starting to collect data and say, oh, if you like this, you might like this. They actually, and when they started, you could connect with your friends and see what movies they watched. And I thought this was a great idea at the time, and still do, and wished it worked that way, where you could see what other people liked, and then you could potentially talk to them about it the next time that you saw them. But these personalized recommendations were really core to their value proposition. And so he calls them differentials because it's how they differentiated themselves from the Blockbuster value proposition. So then let's talk about what the value network is. This is behind the scenes. So how did Netflix work behind the scenes, right? So their revenue model was subscription. It wasn't like going into a store and paying per DVD per day. They had an e-commerce website that they built and that they would continue to build upon. They had data assets and a recommendation engine, which made it really great for people to help them make decisions more quickly or find things that were more relevant to them. And they had a warehouse and a mail distribution center, as opposed to a bunch of retail shops that were more expensive. So that really had an effect on Blockbuster, and eventually they had to close all of their stores. Sad, right? And so when you have this attacker coming in, such as Netflix, this challenger, basically, if you're the incumbent, you have to say, okay, well, what's the two-part test? And the two-part test is, did this challenger radically displace our value? And in the Blockbuster case, the answer is yes. And was there a barrier to imitation? And in this case, it was yes, too, because actually the CEO went to meet with Blockbuster and sell them Netflix early on, and the Blockbuster CEO was like, nah, we could do this ourselves. But they didn't. By the time they did it, it was too late, and they didn't have the support, the digital infrastructure to make it happen. And because they didn't, stop the digital transformation, because they didn't start their digital transformation on time, Netflix kicked their strategy. This is their strategy canvas. And what I did once I had looked at all the competitors was I decided, okay, I'm on the bottom, I'm going to map going from left to right the entire value chain for taking a healthcare product to market, starting with drug discovery, preclinical trials, all the way to getting it out there, the compliance, if there's adverse effects, tracking them, to collecting real-world evidence. And then the idea was I was going to look at these different competitors and rate them, and if they were high in terms of large market share or having a really good user experience or all these different factors that I decided were the top criteria, then they got a 5, and if they were low, then they got a 1. And this way I was able to really compare these different competitors and see, well, everybody's really focused on this portion of the value chain. I wonder why, and start thinking about it and seeing connecting the dots between, well, maybe it's because the data here is only relevant to this particular group of customer segment, or maybe not, or maybe it is the right idea to build a platform that does everything. But using these types of tools are really helpful for doing analysis for these large endeavors. Was a failure. I wasn't able to truly get anything off the ground there. The biggest barrier was that I wasn't able to take the prototypes and put them in front of the actual customers that they had. And this was a pretty big company. They just wouldn't let me do that. And they also weren't very transparent. My boss's boss didn't even know who I was. And this isn't good at all, because you really need stakeholder buy-in to have digital transformation. And so there are so many different things that I just felt like that we were never going to get this initiative off the ground. And it was really depressing, because I had watched all those television commercials, and I had gotten that certificate and read the blue books, and here it was, 1 year later, that I didn't actually have a successful digital transformation project under my belt. But I learned a lot from that experience, and it's something I still really want to, this field of digital transformation is in its infancy, and I really want to continue working with it because I see other successful examples out there. This is like a cruise ship that goes, like the Love Boat that, takes a ton of people and takes them, onto the water. And so, it's not very digital at all. And the way that they've worked up until now is they have this thing called the Princess Patter. I imagine it's this like parchment-looking newsletter that they would hand out to guests to let them know, like, here's when the meals are going to be served and what you're having tonight, and you can go play table tennis up on the 3rd floor. Now they have an actual app that people can use and find out about events, find out who's going, find out where the meals are, what time they're being served, and most importantly, they're able to communicate with the people who are working on the boats. So if there's a problem, that they can find out about it immediately. That you wear when you go there if you buy into this. And this way, the people who are working at the park can track where the flow of the people through the park, if there's long lines at the bathroom, if there's a rush of people going into a restaurant, what rides are being underutilized, and really optimize the park in a way that people have a much better experience using technology to do this. The New York Times, they've really evolved, especially in terms of their journalism. The journalists are now required to go out with, they have their phones, they're shooting video, because people, they now have, 300, I think what the number is, but I think is it 3 million subscribers at least, who are turning to the New York Times online, no longer getting the hard copy because of the rich media, the immediacy, and it's just really the highest quality content for an online newspaper right now. And then Porsche, they give each of their customers a customer ID, and they're able to track them. So if they're having any problems with their vehicle, they find out about it immediately and can let them know. And then also they're able to, from a sales standpoint, be able to start tracking potential customers as they come in. Meanwhile, the people who are driving the Porsches are able to use the new digital technologies to actually find out if there's a parking space available where they're going, and have like apps that we know, like Waze, are integrated into the cars that are being built now. Are you interested in moving beyond product design work, or are you happy being a wireframe monkey? Because if you are interested, there's all kinds of jobs out there. There's people who have this title. You wouldn't believe how many people just in Boston alone have the title, the words digital transformation in their title. Any guesses? Oh my God, you got it. That's right. There's 3,751 people in Boston alone that have digital transformation in their title. And who knows if they're actually doing it, but obviously people are moving in that direction. And if you want, you can actually get a job doing digital transformation. There's plenty of them. These are the ones that are listed here, right? I grabbed the screen yesterday. And if you drill down and look at them, you'll start noticing some of these words popping out that are pretty familiar to us. So if you think about it, like digital transformation may be in its infancy now, but it's not something that's going to go away. And to me, the exciting possibilities are really in looking at companies that are not digitally native companies, because there's a lot more that are out there that aren't. And who knows if today's buzzword might be your next job title. Because I don't want to, we always try to do a postmortem, hopefully, of what went wrong and what would we do if we could go back in time. First of all, I would have asked him when he hired me, would I be able to communicate with the C-suite? I mean, because if he told me I would never get to meet his boss, like sometimes I would find him on LinkedIn and I was like, he's Jewish, I'm Jewish, maybe I'll send him a note and see if that's cool. I was desperate at that point to use anything I had to try to get his attention. And it's not having that bridge was a huge failure. That was an internal bridge that we didn't have. Because if he didn't know what I was doing, he just thought I was out there doing all these crazy experiments. And so I would have asked or I would have insisted that there was more transparency. And then I wouldn't think that I would have to ask this, because he'd read my book, and my book's very much about talking directly to customers. But I would have said, are we going to be able to talk to our customers? And if he had told me no at the very beginning, I would have known that was also a barrier. And so those are the two things I would certainly ask for the next one that rolls in.
I talk to customers every day. I know where I think we should go, but I keep on bumping with the business part because I want to make sure that we do make the decision based on customers. And I want to make the UX strategy more of an important role.
Right. So we have to be more intrapreneurial, the term, as opposed to being entrepreneurial, outside of a company. Intrapreneurial is when we're within a company. And what that means to me is doing things without permission, right? It's always better to me, I mean, maybe we're afraid of losing our jobs, although we shouldn't be because there's a lot of them out there right now. No, seriously, like now is the time to really enjoy that the market is doing so well for technology. But take it upon yourself to come up with these concepts for these prototypes and go ahead and make them yourself, right? Like if you believe in a particular idea and they're not giving you the budget, then do it at night, you know, or do it when you have spare time. Like you can't go in and tell people like, I have this great idea, it's gonna be like this, blah, blah, blah. But if you actually say, hey, I'm really excited about this, I've heard this from customers, and so I've actually made this thing, and I want to go out and show it to them and get some validation and put it in front of them. What do you think? That's one way. I mean, what you really need to convince people is evidence. When they see evidence of how they can increase revenue, that is when they're going to jump. And so basically, like, it's either getting validation on prototypes from real customers and so taking it upon yourself to build them. It's about doing your own market research and finding, hey, look at our competitors. I just did a competitive research. I found out that like company A, company B, company C are doing all these different things. What do you think? Like, we know what we think if we don't do it. Like in your head, you're like, oh, I know that this is the right direction, but you need your manager, right? To be a good strategist is about manipulating people or brainwashing them to have the same idea that you have, but let them think that they had it on their own. That's really what it's about. And so to get them to have that idea, they need evidence. And you put the evidence in front of them like a good lawyer, and it becomes so apparent that they all of a sudden come to the same conclusion that you did, and then they give you the budget. That's how I do it. And just sitting around kind of just being bummed out that you don't have a seat at the strategy table, you have to do something about it. Well, definitely for sure, I want to work for a non-digital company doing something like when I see the Princess Cruises, I'm like, oh God, I wish I did that. Like that is so cool. Well, I lived in Berlin this summer. I didn't get this gig, or maybe I will get this gig, and they just are really slow about it. But I got contacted by the German military, which is really funny because I'm Jewish, so I'd be like a double agent going in there. But they were like talking about having me come in to teach, innovation to their soldiers. And I was like, this would be so like outside of my wheelhouse and so exciting. And so really it's these projects that are not digital projects where they need so much change and I could really make a dent that, is my goal is to work on something like that where I can really prove value and learn from it.